I do want to talk about Wolf Point East. Before going there, though, obviously you guys made a name for yourself, right? A third of all new construction apartment leasing in downtown ran through you. How did we get to that point? I know it's step by step, but how did you get yourself out there? How do these developers find you? Like, I know it's not done in one day and there's not a bullet answer, but talk through some of that because our listeners want to get to this spot, whether it's in investing, being an agent, et cetera.
Yeah, it really doesn't matter what you're doing as long as you do exactly what you say you're going to do. And that is true for any industry, anything in life. As long as you do what you said you were going to do, you will continue to grow your business. That is at the most rudimentary level of how we've achieved success, is we have never promised something that we weren't able to deliver. And a lot of times that meant saying no, right? If you have people who are coming to you and saying, I need to get $4 per square foot, which means you got to rent one bedrooms for $3,000, but the market is saying it should be $2,500, you can't take that deal. Or you have to provide information to the developer or to somebody to say, look, I appreciate that you want to get $3,000 on these apartments, but they're worth $2,500 and here's why. And then if somebody respects that data and understands it and listens, then you work with them. If they continue to argue and don't believe in data, that's when you walk away. That's the number one tell for us, is that if we have somebody who does not believe in the data that we're providing, we can't engage in that, because you can't continue, you'll just never meet expectations. So I think understanding, how you can provide the insight to certainly understand and appreciate where somebody's coming from in terms of what they want, but be able to provide realistic data on why that will or will not work is a really important factor. For us specifically, I think with the luxury living brand, it has been very conscious and intentional from day one in the development of a brand down to the name, right? Luxury Living Chicago Realty. I came from a company where it had apartment in the name, and that was limiting, right? We could only do apartments, and that wasn't going to lend itself to growing marketing and consulting and ultimately for sale brokerage. So being very conscious about the brand. I mean, I had a lot of training in that. I worked for companies like Anheuser-Busch and 20th Century Fox and Nike, whether they were internships or my first jobs before I got into real estate. And I just understood the importance of brand and brand equity in what it meant to be able to grow a company. So from the jump, we've really had that, providing a higher level service experience. We've had this Luxury Living Chicago, and then we've been able to escalate and grow that brand over time very intentionally. I think if we break it down into kind of different periods of time, the first part of 2007 to 2011 was just kind of getting our name out there as something different, right? We were focused in on the high-end market. Nobody had ever really just focused on the luxury apartments before. They'd always, and we made a call. We're like, look, we're only going to work with apartments that are $1,500 or more. We're only going to work with clients who meet, properties who meet a certain criteria. At that time, it was, they had to have washer, dryer, and unit. They had to have central air conditioning, those sorts of things. And we would say no a lot to listings or to people who were looking for apartments that were less expensive. And that's a difficult thing to do when you're first starting out, right? You're leaving money on the table, but you're growing a brand. And then moving forward, getting into kind of that 2013 to call it 2017 range, we built this exclusive business where we were working with developers and gaining insight on renters and the demographics of who was renting and growing that market share in South Loop and West Loop and River North and places like that. And then we were also growing our brokerage and hiring new brokers to work with clients who were looking for apartments in the downtown market in some of the newer, nicer, full amenity buildings that were coming online after the recession. And with that data and that insight and the symbiosis between those two, it positioned me to become a thought leader in the space. So I spoke on panels, I would write white papers. We really focused on our blog and content marketing. and then continue to grow that list and share that with the people who that was going to most resonate with. And then by the end of 17, 18, we had really we had created this concept, we had proof of concept, and we had some initial success. And that's when things really exploded. We did 10 lease ups in 2018, all up and down Milwaukee Avenue and Lincoln Avenue. It was the first time the neighborhoods had experienced luxury apartments. And, if you wanted to live in a luxury apartment, you had to come all the way downtown to River North Gold Coast Streeterville. Starting in like 16, 17, you had some things sprouting up on Milwaukee Avenue and Lincoln Avenue. And it just made sense to kind of translate what we were doing downtown to take it to the neighborhoods because nobody had ever done that before. And then that allowed us to grow out our consulting practice. We brought a branding. We have a branding and marketing studio in-house because that created tremendous economies of scale and a differentiator in that the people who were creating the brand were also the ones who were marketing and leasing it. And that story that, you hear about, hey, what this was a factory back in the 1920s and what happened here, and being able to tell that story from the very beginning really helps empower our leasing agents to feel that much more knowledgeable in terms of what they're doing. So very conscious, intentional brand building over a period of what is now, going on our 15th year.